The Journey to True Abundance, a guide to living without struggle, brought to you by Hyptoria. What if everything you've been taught about achieving success and happiness is backwards? What if the very act of desperately chasing after the things you want is exactly what keeps them out of reach? Imagine discovering that while most people exhaust themselves competing, striving, and struggling to force life to give them what they need, there exists an entirely different way of living, one where abundance flows naturally, where what you need appears without desperate effort, where peace and fulfillment aren't distant goals, but present realities. This isn't wishful thinking or mystical fantasy. It's a practical description of how life works when you understand its deeper principles. Throughout history, certain individuals have stumbled upon this secret. They've learned to live from a place of inner abundance rather than outer scarcity, and as a result, everything they truly need seems to be added unto them effortlessly. The ancient promise that all these things shall be added unto you isn't religious rhetoric. It's a precise instruction manual for accessing a completely different way of being in the world. This book will show you how to make that shift from struggle to flow, from anxiety to peace, from chasing to receiving, regardless of your current circumstances. Chapter 1. The Soul's Deepest Hunger. Every human being carries within them a hunger that no external thing can satisfy. You might recognize this feeling. It's that restless sense that something is missing, even when your life appears complete from the outside. People try to fill this emptiness with possessions, achievements, relationships, or experiences, but nothing seems to provide lasting satisfaction. This hunger isn't a flaw in human design. It's actually pointing you towards something magnificent. Your soul is reaching for its true nature, like a flower turning toward the sun. But most people, not understanding what they're really seeking, exhaust themselves running in circles. Consider the wealthy person who has everything money can buy, yet feels empty inside. Think of the successful professional who achieves every goal but still feels unfulfilled. Or the person who accumulates relationship after relationship but never finds real connection. These aren't rare exceptions. They're the natural result of trying to satisfy a spiritual need through material means. The truth is that your deepest hunger is for righteousness, not in any stern, judgmental sense, but righteousness as wholeness, as alignment with your truest nature. When people say someone is righteous, they often mean self-righteous or morally superior, but true righteousness is something entirely different. It's the state of being completely authentic, completely aligned with love and truth, completely free from the internal conflict that comes from living in opposition to your highest nature. Think of righteousness as the perfect tuning of a musical instrument. When an instrument is properly tuned, every note it produces is beautiful and harmonious. When it's out of tune, even the most skilled musician can't make it sound right. Similarly, when your life is aligned with righteousness, with your authentic, loving nature, everything you do tends to create harmony and beauty. When you're out of alignment, even your best efforts often create discord. This is why people who seem to have everything can feel so empty, while others who live simply but authentically radiate contentment. The external circumstances matter far less than the internal alignment. But here's where it gets interesting. Most people try to achieve this alignment through willpower alone. They think, I'll just force myself to be good, to do the right thing, to think positive thoughts. This approach might create temporary improvement, but it's exhausting and ultimately unsustainable, because it's still based on struggle and effort. There's another way, a way of growing into righteousness naturally, like a plant growing toward light. This doesn't happen through forcing yourself to be different, but through understanding and removing the obstacles that prevent your natural goodness from expressing itself. Chapter 2. The Great Competition and Why It Never Works. Walk into any busy office, marketplace, or social gathering, and you'll witness something fascinating. Nearly everyone is engaged in some form of competition. People compete for attention, for resources, for status, for love. They believe that life is fundamentally a game of limited resources, where someone else's gain necessarily means their loss. This competitive mindset seems so natural that most people never question it. After all, doesn't Darwin's theory tell us that life is about survival of the fittest? Don't we see competition everywhere in nature? But look more closely, and you'll discover something remarkable. The most successful elements in nature are actually those that cooperate most effectively. Consider a forest. On the surface, it might seem like trees compete with each other for sunlight, water, and nutrients. But scientists have discovered that beneath the forest floor, trees are actually connected through vast networks of fungal relationships, sharing resources and information. When one tree is threatened by disease or insects, others send it nutrients and chemical signals to help it defend itself. The forest thrives not through competition, but through cooperation. The same principle applies to human life, though few people recognize it. When you're caught in competitive thinking, you're operating from a fundamental misunderstanding about how abundance works. You believe that there's not enough to go around, so you must fight to get your share. This belief creates the very scarcity you fear. But notice what happens when people truly cooperate, when they operate from abundance rather than scarcity. Magic seems to occur. Resources appear that no one had noticed before. Creative solutions emerge that benefit everyone. Opportunities multiply rather than divide. The problem with competition isn't that it's evil or wrong, but that it's incredibly inefficient. When you're competing, you're spending enormous energy trying to take something away from someone else rather than creating something new. You're focused on rearranging existing pieces rather than expanding the whole pie. More importantly, competition is based on fear. Fear that there's not enough. Fear that you're not enough. Fear that others will get what you need. This fear creates tension in your body, clouds your thinking, and actually repels the very things you're trying to attract. Consider two people looking for employment. One approaches the job search from a competitive mindset. I need to beat out other candidates. I need to impress the interviewer more than anyone else. I need to present myself as superior to other applicants. This person walks into interviews carrying the energy of desperation and competition. The other person approaches from a different place. I'm looking for the right fit, where I can contribute my unique gifts. I trust that there's work in the world that needs exactly what I have to offer. I'm genuinely interested in whether this organization and I can serve each other well. This person walks into interviews carrying the energy of confidence and abundance. Which person do you think is more attractive to employers? Which one would you rather work with? Which approach feels more sustainable and enjoyable? The competitive person is operating from what we might call the lower laws. The laws of scarcity, struggle, and survival. These laws do exist, and they will govern your life if that's the level you choose to operate from. But there are higher laws available. Laws of love, abundance, and cooperation. When you align with these higher laws, the lower laws lose their power over you. This doesn't mean you become passive or stop striving. It means you strive from a different motivation and in a different way. Instead of trying to take something away from others, you focus on giving something of value. Instead of trying to win at someone else's expense, you look for ways everyone can win. Instead of protecting what you have, you trust that as you give, more flows to you. Chapter 3. Finding your true foundation. Most people's lives are built on foundations that shift like sand. They base their security on their job, their relationships, their possessions, their reputation, or their skills. While these things may be important, they're all temporary and beyond your complete control. When you build your sense of security on things that can be taken away, you live in constant anxiety, always trying to protect and control what you have. But what if there was something within you that couldn't be taken away? Something that remained constant regardless of external circumstances? What if your true security came not from what you possess, but from what you are? This is the foundation that truly stable people have discovered. They've found within themselves something permanent and unchanging. Not their personality, which changes. Not their thoughts, which come and go. Not their emotions, which fluctuate, but something deeper. You might call this your authentic self, your essential nature, your connection to the divine, or simply your core being. The name doesn't matter, as much as the recognition that there's something within you that remains steady regardless of what happens around you. Think of it like this. Imagine you're a house. Most people spend their entire lives renovating the rooms, changing the furniture, improving the decorations. They think that if they can just get the external appearance right, they'll be happy and secure. But a wise person starts by examining the foundation. If the foundation is solid, the house will weather any storm. If the foundation is weak, even the most beautiful renovations won't provide real security. Your true foundation isn't built from external achievements or possessions. It's discovered through what you might call inner archaeology, carefully examining your own thoughts, motivations, and reactions to understand what drives them. This process isn't always comfortable because it requires honesty about parts of yourself you might prefer to ignore. For instance, you might discover that much of your behavior is motivated by the desire to be liked, approved of, or admired by others. There's nothing inherently wrong with wanting connection and appreciation, but when this desire becomes your primary foundation, you become like a weather vane, constantly shifting direction based on others' opinions. Your sense of worth goes up and down based on external feedback, creating an exhausting emotional roller coaster. Or you might discover that you're driven primarily by the desire to accumulate things, money, possessions, experiences, believing that having more will make you feel secure and happy. Again, there's nothing wrong with enjoying material things, but when your sense of security depends on having them, you become enslaved to the endless pursuit of more. The process of finding your true foundation involves gradually letting go of these external dependencies and discovering what remains when they're gone. This can be scary at first because it feels like losing your identity. Who are you if you're not your job, your possessions, your relationships, your achievements? But as you move through this process, something remarkable happens. You begin to discover that your essential nature, the part of you that observes your thoughts, that loves, that creates, that connects with others, doesn't depend on any external thing. This part of you was there when you were a child, before you had any achievements or possessions. It's there when you're alone, without anyone to impress. It's there when you have nothing to do, no role to play. This essential nature isn't empty or boring, as you might fear. It's actually the source of everything creative, loving, and genuinely satisfying in your life. When you begin to identify with this part of yourself, rather than with your external circumstances, you discover a security that nothing can shake. From this foundation, your relationship with external things changes completely. Instead of desperately needing them for your security, you can appreciate them without attachment. Instead of being driven by anxiety to accumulate and protect, you can respond to life from curiosity and love. Instead of being at the mercy of circumstances, you can navigate them with wisdom and grace. This shift doesn't happen overnight, and it doesn't mean you become indifferent to the world around you. If anything, you become more engaged and effective because you're operating from strength rather than weakness, from love rather than fear. Chapter 4. The Pathways of Inner Transformation. Once you've glimpsed the possibility of living from a different foundation, the question becomes, how do you actually get there? The journey from a life of struggle and anxiety to one of peace and natural abundance isn't accomplished through wishful thinking or positive affirmations alone. It requires a systematic approach to inner transformation. Think of this process like learning to play a musical instrument. You don't become a pianist by simply wanting to play beautiful music, or by affirming, "I am a great pianist." You practice scales, you study technique, you gradually build skill through consistent effort. The same principle applies to inner development. The first pathway involves examining and transforming your desires. Most people are controlled by their wants and impulses without even realizing it. They see something they want and immediately begin strategizing how to get it. They feel an uncomfortable emotion and automatically seek ways to avoid or escape it. They react to circumstances based on their immediate preferences without considering the larger picture. This reactive way of living keeps you in a state of internal chaos. You're constantly being pulled in different directions by conflicting desires, like a person trying to drive a car while multiple passengers grab the steering wheel. Learning to observe your desires without being controlled by them is like becoming the driver of your own life. This doesn't mean suppressing or denying what you want, but rather developing the ability to pause between impulse and action. In that pause, you can ask yourself, is acting on this desire aligned with my highest good and the good of others? Will it lead to genuine satisfaction or just temporary pleasure, followed by more wanting? This practice gradually develops what you might call conscious choice rather than reactive behavior. You begin to choose your actions based on wisdom rather than impulse, on love rather than fear, on what serves your authentic self rather than what satisfies your ego. The second pathway involves examining and releasing your opinions and judgments. Most people are heavily invested in being right about things. They have strong opinions about politics, relationships, spirituality, and countless other topics. They spend enormous energy defending their viewpoints and trying to convince others to agree with them. While having preferences and perspectives is natural, becoming attached to being right creates immense suffering. It puts you in constant conflict with reality whenever life doesn't match your expectations. It separates you from others who have different viewpoints. It closes your mind to new information and possibilities. Learning to hold your opinions lightly, to have preferences without being enslaved by them, is incredibly freeing. It allows you to stay curious and open rather than defensive and rigid. It enables you to connect with people across difference rather than only with those who think like you. It keeps you in a learning mode rather than a knowing mode. This doesn't mean becoming wishy-washy or having no convictions. It means distinguishing between principles, which may be unchanging, and opinions, which can evolve with new understanding. A principle might be, I choose to treat all people with respect. An opinion might be, I think this particular policy is the best approach to a complex problem. The third pathway involves releasing your attachment to your self-image. Most people have an elaborate mental picture of who they are, who they should be, and how they should be perceived by others. They spend tremendous energy maintaining and protecting this image, even when it no longer serves them or reflects their authentic nature. Your self-image might include ideas like, I'm a successful person. I'm someone who has it all together. I'm a spiritual person. I'm a victim of circumstances. Or, I'm not good enough. Whether positive or negative, these self-concepts become prisons that limit your ability to respond freshly to each situation. When you're overly identified with your self-image, you can't admit mistakes because that would threaten your picture of yourself as someone who doesn't make mistakes. You can't try new things because you might fail and damage your image as someone competent. You can't be vulnerable because that would conflict with your image as someone strong. Releasing attachment to self-image doesn't mean having no sense of identity or becoming a doormat. It means becoming comfortable with not knowing exactly who you are in every moment, allowing yourself to be surprised by your own responses. It means being more interested in authenticity than in maintaining any particular image. As you work with these three pathways, transforming your relationship with desires, opinions, and self, image, something remarkable begins to happen. The internal noise and conflict that once dominated your inner life starts to quiet down. In that quietness, you begin to access a different kind of intelligence, a wisdom that doesn't come from thinking, but from a deeper knowing. This wisdom doesn't make you passive or disengaged. Instead, it makes you more effective because you're operating from clarity rather than confusion, from love rather than fear, from wisdom rather than reactivity. You begin to respond to life rather than merely reacting to it. Chapter 5. Living in the Present Reality. One of the most profound discoveries you can make is that all your power, all your peace, and all your possibilities exist only in this present moment. Yet most people spend their lives everywhere but here, lost in regrets about the past, anxious about the future, or caught up in mental stories about how things should be different. This isn't just a philosophical point. It's intensely practical. When your attention is scattered across time, you're like someone trying to water a garden with a hose that has holes in it. Most of your energy leaks out before it can accomplish anything useful. Consider how much mental energy you spend reliving past conversations, imagining how you could have said something differently, or nursing resentments about old hurts. Notice how much anxiety you create by projecting current problems into imaginary future scenarios, playing out worst-case situations that may never occur. All of this mental activity is happening in the present moment, but it's not engaged with present reality. It's like being physically in one place, while your mind is somewhere else entirely. You're not fully available to respond to what's actually happening right now. When you learn to bring your attention fully into the present, several things begin to happen. First, you discover that most of your problems exist only in your thoughts. The actual present moment, stripped of your mental commentary about it, is usually much more manageable than your mind makes it seem. For example, you might be worried about a difficult conversation you need to have tomorrow. In your mind, you've already played out a dozen scenarios of how it might go wrong. You've anticipated all the ways the other person might react badly. You've worked yourself into a state of anxiety about something that hasn't happened yet and might never happen. But if you bring your attention to this actual moment, what do you find? You're sitting somewhere, breathing, perhaps reading this. Nothing catastrophic is happening right now. The conversation hasn't occurred yet. You're creating suffering for yourself by living in imaginary time rather than real time. This doesn't mean ignoring practical planning or learning from past experience. It means distinguishing between useful thinking and mental spinning. Useful thinking is focused, purposeful, and brief. Mental spinning is repetitive, anxiety-generating, and endless. When you're fully present, you also discover that this moment contains everything you need to take the next right step. You might not be able to figure out how to solve all your problems or achieve all your goals, but you can almost always see what would be helpful to do right now. This might be as simple as taking a deep breath, making a phone call, cleaning your kitchen, or having an honest conversation. Present moment awareness has a way of cutting through mental complexity and revealing simple, practical next steps. Living in the present also dramatically improves the quality of your experiences. When you're mentally elsewhere, you miss the texture of life. The way sunlight looks through your window, the expression on someone's face, the taste of your food, the feeling of accomplishment after completing a task. These aren't just pleasant extras. They're the actual substance of a satisfying life. Satisfaction doesn't come from achieving some future goal. It comes from being fully present to what you're experiencing right now. But perhaps most importantly, present moment awareness connects you with what you might call the intelligence of life itself. When you're caught up in mental activity, you're limited to your thinking mind, which, while useful, is just one form of intelligence. When you're present, you begin to access intuitive intelligence, the kind of knowing that helps you say exactly the right thing at the right moment, that guides you toward opportunities you couldn't have planned, that helps you navigate complex situations with grace and wisdom. This intelligence doesn't come from trying to figure everything out in advance. It emerges spontaneously when you're fully available to what's happening now. You've probably experienced this occasionally. Moments when you handled the situation perfectly without really thinking about it, when exactly the right words came out of your mouth, when you knew just what to do, even though you couldn't explain why. These weren't accidents. They were examples of what becomes available when you're truly present. Learning to live in the present isn't about perfection or maintaining some ideal state of awareness. It's about gently returning your attention to now whenever you notice it has wandered. It's about treating this moment as if it matters, as if it's the only moment you have, which, in fact, it is. Chapter 6. The Simplicity Beyond Complexity. Most people make life far more complicated than it needs to be. They create elaborate strategies for success, complex rules for relationships, and intricate systems for managing their time and energy. They believe that because life feels complicated, it requires complicated solutions. But what if the opposite were true? What if life only feels complicated when you're approaching it in the wrong way, and the solutions are actually quite simple? Think about how a child approaches life. Children don't have strategic plans for making friends. They simply find someone interesting and start playing with them. They don't have complex philosophies about happiness. They just do what brings them joy in the moment. They don't worry about their image or reputation. They express themselves authentically and naturally. Of course, children also lack important capabilities like judgment, patience, and long-term thinking. The goal isn't to become childish, but to become childlike. To recover the simplicity and directness of a child while maintaining adult wisdom and responsibility. This childlike simplicity emerges naturally as you release the layers of complication that don't really serve you. Much of what you think is necessary complexity is actually anxiety dressed up as planning, or ego dressed up as sophistication. For instance, you might have elaborate theories about why your relationships work or don't work, complex strategies for managing your finances, or detailed plans for achieving your goals. Some planning is useful, but often these mental constructions become more important than the reality they're supposed to help you navigate. True simplicity means responding to what's actually needed in each situation, rather than following a predetermined script. It means trusting your basic goodness and intelligence, rather than trying to control everything through mental effort. This doesn't make you naive or passive. A person operating from genuine simplicity can be incredibly effective because they're not wasting energy on unnecessary complications. They're like a river flowing toward the ocean, not because they're trying to get there, but because that's their natural direction. When you're operating from this kind of simplicity, decision-making becomes much easier. Instead of weighing dozens of factors and trying to predict all possible outcomes, you can often see clearly what would be kind, honest, and helpful. Instead of strategizing how to get what you want, you can focus on being the kind of person you'd like to be. This approach might seem risky to a mind that's accustomed to trying to control outcomes, but consider how much energy you spend on worry, planning, and mental problem solving, and how often those efforts actually improve your results. Often, the simplest response is also the most effective. For example, instead of crafting a careful strategy for asking your boss for a raise, you might simply have an honest conversation about your contributions and needs. Instead of manipulating social situations to make yourself look good, you might just be genuinely interested in others. Instead of trying to figure out the perfect career path, you might simply do excellent work at whatever you're doing right now. This doesn't mean being unprepared or careless. It means distinguishing between useful preparation and anxious overthinking. It means trusting that when you're aligned with your authentic nature, the right actions tend to emerge naturally. The movement toward simplicity also applies to your inner life. Much of what you call psychological complexity is actually the result of being out of touch with your authentic feelings and needs. When you're trying to be someone you're not, or when you're afraid to acknowledge what you really want, life becomes unnecessarily complicated. But when you're honest with yourself about what you're feeling and what you need, your path often becomes much clearer. You might discover that many of your problems were created by trying to avoid or deny simple truths about yourself. This kind of honesty isn't always comfortable, but it's incredibly liberating. Instead of maintaining elaborate defenses and justifications, you can simply acknowledge what's true and respond accordingly. Instead of trying to convince yourself and others that you're different than you are, you can work with your actual nature. As you move toward greater simplicity, you might find that you need fewer things to be happy, that you can accomplish more with less effort, and that your relationships become more genuine and satisfying. You're no longer exhausting yourself trying to maintain complicated systems that don't really work. This doesn't mean your life becomes boring, or that you stop growing and learning. If anything, life becomes more interesting because you're actually experiencing it rather than just thinking about it. You're responding to what's real rather than what you imagine is there. Chapter 7. Unshakable Wisdom. There's a quality of understanding that doesn't depend on external circumstances, that remains steady regardless of what's happening around you. This isn't intellectual knowledge that you can lose or forget, but a deeper wisdom that emerges from living authentically and paying attention to how life actually works. This wisdom doesn't come from reading books or attending seminars, though these can be helpful. It develops through direct experience, through making mistakes and learning from them, through observing the consequences of different approaches to life, through noticing what creates genuine satisfaction versus what creates temporary pleasure followed by emptiness. People who've developed this kind of wisdom often seem remarkably calm and centered, even in challenging situations. They're not indifferent or detached. They're deeply engaged with life, but not thrown off balance by it. They've learned to distinguish between what they can control and what they can't, and they've stopped wasting energy fighting reality. This doesn't mean they're passive or resigned. They respond actively and appropriately to situations, but from a place of clarity rather than reactivity. They've learned that being upset about something doesn't help change it, that worry doesn't prevent problems, and that trying to control outcomes often makes things worse. One of the key elements of this wisdom is understanding the difference between your circumstances and your response to your circumstances. Your circumstances, what happens to you, are often beyond your control. Your response, how you interpret and react to what happens, is always within your control, though it might not feel that way at first. For example, if you lose your job, that's a circumstance you didn't choose. But how you respond to losing your job, whether you see it as a disaster or an opportunity, whether you become bitter or remain open to new possibilities, whether you let it define your worth or treat it as a temporary situation. These are choices you can make. This doesn't minimize the real challenges that difficult circumstances can create. Losing a job can mean financial stress, uncertainty, and genuine hardship. The point isn't to pretend these things don't matter, but to recognize that your internal response to them makes a huge difference in how you experience them and how effectively you can navigate them. People who've developed this wisdom have often discovered that their worst experiences, while painful at the time, led to some of their greatest growth and most important insights. They've learned to trust that life has an intelligence of its own, that apparent setbacks often redirect them towards something better, even when they can't see it at the time. This doesn't mean adopting a naive optimism that everything always works out perfectly. It means developing a deeper trust in your ability to handle whatever comes, and a recognition that resistance to what's already happening only adds unnecessary suffering to whatever genuine challenges you're facing. Another aspect of this wisdom is learning to see beyond surface appearances. Things that look like problems sometimes turn out to be opportunities. People who seem difficult sometimes become your greatest teachers. Situations that appear hopeless sometimes contain the seeds of remarkable breakthroughs. This doesn't happen through positive thinking or denial, but through developing the patience to let situations unfold before deciding what they mean. It means staying curious about what you might learn from each experience, rather than immediately categorizing it as good or bad. This wisdom also includes a deep understanding of human nature, both your own and others. You begin to see that everyone is doing the best they can with their current level of understanding and emotional capacity. This doesn't excuse harmful behavior, but it helps you respond to it more skillfully. When someone treats you badly, instead of taking it personally or retaliating, you might recognize that their behavior says more about their inner state than about you. This understanding allows you to respond with appropriate boundaries without carrying resentment or losing your own peace. Perhaps most importantly, this wisdom includes a profound acceptance of yourself as you are right now, while remaining open to growth and change. You stop waiting to be different before you allow yourself to be happy. You work with your actual strengths and limitations, rather than fighting against them or pretending they don't exist. This self-acceptance isn't complacency, it's the foundation for genuine change. When you're not spending energy rejecting parts of yourself, you have more energy available for actual growth. When you're honest about where you are, you can take realistic steps toward where you want to go. Chapter 8: The Power of Genuine Gentleness. In a world that often equates strength with aggression and success with competition, it might seem counterintuitive to suggest that gentleness is actually one of the most powerful forces available to you. But observe carefully, and you'll notice that the people who have the greatest positive influence on others are often those who embody genuine gentleness. This isn't the weakness that sometimes masquerades as gentleness, the people-pleasing, conflict-avoiding behavior that comes from fear or insecurity. True gentleness comes from strength, not weakness. It's the quality of someone who has nothing to prove and nothing to defend because they're secure in their own worth. Think about the people who've had the most positive impact on your life. Chances are, at least some of them were people who treated you with genuine kindness and respect, who saw your potential even when you couldn't see it yourself, who offered encouragement without judgment. These people influenced you not through force or manipulation, but through the power of their loving presence. Gentleness has this kind of power because it disarms defensiveness and opens hearts. When someone approaches you with genuine kindness, your natural response is to soften, to become more open, to want to respond in kind. When someone approaches you with aggression or manipulation, your natural response is to defend yourself, to close down, to become suspicious or hostile. This means that gentleness is often the most effective way to create positive change, both in yourself and in others. When you approach your own mistakes and limitations with kindness rather than harsh self-criticism, you create an environment where genuine growth can occur. When you respond to others' difficult behavior with compassion rather than judgment, you often bring out their better nature. This doesn't mean being a doormat or tolerating genuinely harmful behavior. Gentleness can be combined with clear boundaries and firm action when necessary. In fact, someone who is truly gentle often has no difficulty saying no or taking strong action because they're not driven by anger or fear. For example, a gentle parent might calmly remove a dangerous object from a child's hands while explaining why it's not safe to play with. A gentle manager might clearly address an employee's poor performance while maintaining respect for their dignity as a person. A gentle person might end a relationship that isn't working while still caring about the other person's well-being. The key is that the motivation behind the action comes from love rather than fear, from a desire to help rather than to punish, from wisdom rather than emotion. This makes the action more effective, because it's more likely to create understanding and cooperation, rather than resistance and resentment. Gentleness toward yourself is equally important. Most people have an internal critic that's far harsher than they would ever be toward a friend. They berate themselves for mistakes, compare themselves unfavorably to others, and maintain impossible standards that set them up for constant failure and frustration. This internal harshness doesn't motivate positive change. It actually prevents it. When you're constantly criticizing yourself, you spend most of your energy defending against those attacks, rather than learning and growing. You become so focused on avoiding criticism that you stop taking the risks necessary for development. But when you treat yourself with the same kindness you'd show a good friend, something remarkable happens. You become willing to look honestly at your mistakes, because you know you won't attack yourself for them. You become willing to try new things, because you know you won't destroy yourself if you fail. You become willing to be vulnerable, because you know you'll treat yourself with compassion. This creates an internal environment where genuine growth can flourish. Instead of changing yourself through force and criticism, you begin to evolve naturally, like a plant that grows toward light because that's its nature, not because it's forcing itself to grow. Gentleness also has a mysterious quality of attracting what you need. When you approach life with a genuine desire to help rather than to get, people want to help you in return. When you treat others with respect and kindness, they often go out of their way to support you. When you're genuinely peaceful, you seem to find yourself in peaceful situations more often. This isn't manipulation or strategy. It's simply how the world tends to respond to authentic goodness. Most people are naturally drawn to those who make them feel better about themselves and about life in general. When you embody genuine gentleness, you become someone people want to be around, work with, and support. But perhaps most importantly, gentleness connects you with your own heart. When you're operating from anger, fear, or aggression, you're cut off from your natural warmth and wisdom. When you're gentle, you're aligned with the part of yourself that naturally cares about others' well-being, that wants to contribute something positive to the world, that finds joy in simple acts of kindness. This alignment doesn't make you weak or ineffective. If anything, it makes you more powerful, because you're operating from your authentic nature, rather than fighting against it. You're working with the grain of who you really are, rather than against it. Chapter 9. The Righteous Life. The word righteous has unfortunately become associated with self-righteousness, moral superiority, and judgmental attitudes. But true righteousness has nothing to do with being better than others or following a rigid set of rules. It's about living in alignment with your deepest values, with integrity, honesty, and genuine care for others' well-being. A righteous person in this sense isn't someone who's perfect or who never makes mistakes. They're someone who's committed to truth, to fairness, to kindness, and to taking responsibility for their actions. They've made the decision to live from their highest nature, rather than their lowest impulses. This creates a kind of inner strength that's difficult to shake. When you're living with integrity, you don't have to worry about your lies being discovered, because you're not lying. You don't have to maintain elaborate defenses, because you have nothing to hide. You don't have to manipulate situations, because you're comfortable with authentic interaction. This doesn't mean life becomes free of challenges, or that everyone will like you. In fact, living with genuine integrity sometimes creates difficulties, because you won't compromise your values for convenience or popularity. But the difficulties that come from external circumstances are much easier to handle than the inner turmoil that comes from living out of alignment with your values. When you're living righteously, you have access to what you might call clean energy that isn't contaminated by guilt, shame, or internal conflict. You're not wasting mental energy, keeping track of lies or maintaining false images. You're not depleting yourself through activities that go against your deeper nature. This clean energy makes you much more effective in everything you do. You can focus completely on the task at hand because you're not distracted by internal conflict. You can form genuine relationships because you're being authentic. You can make decisions more easily because you have clear principles to guide you. People who live this way often seem to have an unusual amount of luck or to attract opportunities that others miss. This isn't really luck. It's the natural result of living with integrity. When you're trustworthy, people trust you with opportunities. When you're honest, people want to work with you. When you're genuine, people feel comfortable around you and want to help you succeed. This also creates what you might call invisible protection. When you're not trying to deceive anyone or take unfair advantage, you're not creating enemies or generating negative consequences that will come back to haunt you. When you treat others fairly, they're motivated to treat you fairly in return. But perhaps most importantly, living righteously creates inner peace. When your actions align with your values, you can sleep well at night. You don't have to worry about what people might discover about you, because there's nothing to discover. You don't have to remember what story you told to whom, because you're always telling the truth. You don't have to second-guess your decisions, because you made them from your best understanding of what was right. This inner peace isn't just pleasant, it's incredibly practical. When your mind isn't consumed with guilt, worry about consequences, or the effort of maintaining false positions, you have much more mental capacity available for creative thinking, problem-solving, and responding wisely to new situations. Living righteously also means being willing to face uncomfortable truths about yourself and your situation. Instead of pretending everything is fine when it isn't, you acknowledge problems honestly so you can address them effectively. Instead of blaming others for your difficulties, you take responsibility for your part and focus on what you can change. This honesty extends to your relationships with others. You say what you mean and mean what you say. You don't promise what you can't deliver, and you follow through on what you do promise. You admit when you're wrong and make amends when you've caused harm. This level of authenticity can feel risky at first, because you're giving up the seeming protection that comes from hiding behind false images or manipulating situations to your advantage. But what you discover is that authenticity actually provides much greater security than deception ever could. When people know they can trust you to be honest, they share important information with you and include you in opportunities. When they know you'll keep your word, they're willing to make agreements and form partnerships. When they know you care about fairness, they don't feel they need to protect themselves from you. Living righteously also means extending this same honesty and fairness to yourself. You don't pretend to be further along in your development than you actually are. But you also don't diminish yourself or deny your genuine strengths and accomplishments. You treat yourself with the same kindness and respect you show others. This creates a stable foundation for your entire life. Instead of constantly worrying about maintaining an image or protecting a false position, you can focus your energy on learning, growing, and contributing. Instead of being driven by fear of discovery or punishment, you can be motivated by genuine care and authentic desire. The righteous life isn't about perfection, it's about doing your best. It's about doing your best with your current level of understanding, while remaining open to learning and growth. It's about treating others as you would want to be treated, not because you expect something in return, but because that's who you choose to be. This choice to live from your highest nature rather than your lowest impulses is available to everyone in every moment. It doesn't require special talents or favorable circumstances. It only requires the willingness to be honest, fair, and kind, even when it's not convenient or immediately rewarding. Chapter 10. The Nature of Perfect Love. Love is perhaps the most misunderstood force in human experience. Most people think of love as an emotion, something that happens to you when you meet the right person or achieve the right circumstances. But the love that transforms lives and creates lasting peace is something quite different. True love isn't dependent on others behaving in particular ways or on life meeting your expectations. It's a way of being that you can choose regardless of external circumstances. It's the decision to wish well for all beings, to see the best in every situation, and to respond from kindness rather than fear. This doesn't mean being naive about human nature or pretending that harmful behavior is acceptable. It means recognizing that everyone, including those who act badly, is fundamentally seeking happiness and peace, though they may be going about it in misguided ways. When you approach life from this perspective, something remarkable happens. You stop taking things personally. When someone is rude or difficult, instead of assuming it's about you, you recognize that they're probably struggling with something in their own life. This understanding allows you to respond with patience rather than defensiveness. This kind of love also frees you from the exhausting work of trying to control how others behave. Instead of spending energy trying to make people treat you better, you focus on being the kind of person you want to be, regardless of how others act. This actually makes you much more influential, because people are naturally drawn to those who embody genuine love and acceptance. Perfect love also means loving yourself with the same unconditional acceptance you extend to others. This isn't narcissism or self-indulgence. It's the recognition that you, like everyone else, are doing your best with your current level of understanding and emotional capacity. When you truly love yourself, you stop waiting for others to validate your worth. You stop trying to earn love through performance or achievement. You recognize that your value is inherent, not dependent on what you accomplish or how others treat you. This self-love creates an interesting paradox. The less you need love from others, the more lovable you become. When you're not desperately seeking approval or validation, you can interact with others from genuine interest and care rather than neediness. People feel this difference and are naturally drawn to it. Perfect love is also fearless. When you truly care about others' well-being rather than just protecting yourself, you're willing to have difficult conversations, to set necessary boundaries, and to take actions that might be temporarily uncomfortable but serve the greater good. For example, loving parents sometimes have to disappoint their children in order to teach important lessons. Loving friends sometimes have to speak difficult truths. Loving leaders sometimes have to make unpopular decisions. The motivation isn't to hurt, but to help, even when the help isn't immediately appreciated. This fearless quality of love gives you access to remarkable power. When you're not afraid of others' reactions, you can respond authentically to each situation. When you're not trying to protect yourself, you can focus completely on what would be most helpful. When you're not seeking anything for yourself, you often receive everything you need. Love also has a mysterious quality of multiplying itself. The more love you express, the more you seem to have available. Unlike material resources, which diminish when shared, love increases through expression. The person who loves much finds themselves loved in return, not through manipulation or trade, but as a natural response to their loving presence. This multiplication happens partly because love creates the conditions for more love to emerge. When you treat someone with genuine kindness, you awaken their own capacity for kindness. When you see the best in people, you often call forth their best qualities. When you create an atmosphere of acceptance and care, others feel safe to open their hearts. Perfect love is also wise. It's not mere sentiment or wishful thinking, but a clear-eyed recognition of what truly serves everyone's highest good. Sometimes this means saying no to requests, ending relationships that aren't healthy, or taking firm action to protect someone from harm. The wisdom of love comes from its connection to truth. When you truly care about others' well-being, you're motivated to see situations clearly rather than through the filter of your own wants and fears. You're willing to acknowledge difficult realities because you want to respond helpfully rather than just pleasantly. This combination of unconditional acceptance and clear-eyed wisdom creates an incredibly stable foundation for life. You're neither naive about human nature nor cynical about it. You can engage fully with life while maintaining inner peace. You can care deeply without being attached to outcomes. From this foundation, your relationships become sources of joy rather than anxiety. Your work becomes an expression of service rather than mere survival. Your daily activities become opportunities to express and experience love rather than tasks to be endured. Most importantly, when you embody perfect love, you discover that you already have everything you truly need. The love you've been seeking from others was already within you, waiting to be expressed. The peace you've been trying to create through external arrangements was already available in your own heart. The fulfillment you've been pursuing through achievements and acquisitions emerges naturally when you live from love. Chapter 11. True Freedom. Most people's idea of freedom is the ability to do whatever they want without consequences, or the accumulation of enough resources to insulate themselves from life's demands. But this kind of freedom is actually a form of slavery. Slavery to your impulses, your fears, and your endless wants. True freedom is something entirely different. It's the ability to choose your response to any situation based on wisdom rather than impulse, love rather than fear, and authentic values rather than social pressure or personal comfort. This freedom doesn't come from having unlimited options or resources. It comes from developing the inner capacity to remain centered regardless of external circumstances. A person who has this freedom might have very few material possessions, but feel completely free, while someone with enormous wealth and options might feel completely trapped by their circumstances. The path to this freedom begins with recognizing the ways you're currently enslaved, not by external forces, but by your own unconscious patterns and reactions. Most people are controlled by their thoughts and emotions without realizing it. They feel angry and automatically lash out. They feel afraid and automatically withdraw. They want something and automatically pursue it without considering the consequences. These automatic reactions create a kind of internal prison where you're constantly at the mercy of whatever thoughts or feelings arise. You might think you're free because no one is forcing you to act in particular ways, but you're actually being controlled by forces you don't understand or direct. True freedom develops as you learn to observe these internal forces without being controlled by them. You notice when anger arises, but you don't have to act from anger. You feel fear, but you don't have to let fear make your decisions. You experience desire, but you don't have to be driven by desire. This doesn't mean suppressing or denying your thoughts and emotions. It means developing the space between experiencing something and acting on it. In that space, you can choose how to respond based on what would be wise, kind, and helpful, rather than just what would satisfy your immediate impulse. This kind of freedom is incredibly practical. When you're not controlled by your emotions, you can navigate difficult situations with grace and wisdom. When you're not driven by unconscious fears, you can take appropriate risks and pursue meaningful goals. When you're not enslaved by endless wants, you can appreciate what you have and make thoughtful decisions about what you truly need. But perhaps most importantly, this freedom allows you to be authentic. When you're not constantly reacting to internal and external pressures, you can respond from your genuine nature. You can say what you really mean, pursue what genuinely matters to you, and form relationships based on authentic connection rather than mutual need or manipulation. This authenticity creates a different kind of power. Instead of trying to control outcomes through force or manipulation, you influence situations through the power of your genuine presence. Instead of trying to get others to give you what you want, you focus on giving what you have to offer. Instead of trying to avoid all discomfort, you develop the capacity to move through difficulty with grace. True freedom also includes freedom from the opinions of others. This doesn't mean not caring about anyone else's perspective, but not being controlled by the need for approval or the fear of criticism. When you know who you are and you're comfortable with that, others' opinions become interesting information rather than threats to your sense of self. This freedom from others' opinions allows you to make decisions based on your own values and wisdom rather than on what will make you look good or avoid conflict. You can admit when you're wrong, ask for help when you need it, and pursue paths that might not be impressive to others but are meaningful to you. Another aspect of this freedom is liberation from the need to have things be different than they are. This doesn't mean passive acceptance of everything, but freedom from the mental suffering that comes from constantly fighting reality. When you can accept what's happening without losing your peace, you have much more energy available for responding effectively. For example, if you lose your job, you might feel disappointed or concerned about the practical implications, but you don't have to add mental suffering by telling yourself stories about how unfair it is, how it shouldn't have happened, or how it proves something terrible about you or the world. You can acknowledge the reality and focus your energy on responding constructively. This freedom extends to your relationship with your own thoughts and emotions. You begin to realize that you are not your thoughts. You are the one who observes thoughts. You are not your emotions. You are the one who experiences emotions. This creates enormous space for choice about how much attention to give different mental and emotional experiences. When you realize that thoughts and emotions are temporary visitors rather than permanent residents, you can let difficult ones pass through without resistance, while cultivating positive ones without attachment. You're no longer at war with your own inner experience, which frees up tremendous energy for creative and constructive activities. True freedom is not something you achieve once and then possess forever. It's something you choose moment by moment, in each situation, with each decision. It's the ongoing choice to respond from your highest wisdom rather than your lowest impulses, from love rather than fear, from authenticity rather than pretense. This choice is always available to you, regardless of your circumstances. Even in the most constrained external situations, you retain the freedom to choose your internal response. Even when others try to control you, they cannot touch your essential freedom unless you give it away. Chapter 12. Greatness and Goodness United. In a world obsessed with celebrity, achievement, and external success, it's easy to lose sight of what true greatness actually looks like. Most people think of greatness in terms of fame, wealth, power, or exceptional talent. But observe the people who have had the most positive and lasting impact on the world, and you'll discover something interesting. Their greatness was inseparable from their goodness. True greatness isn't about being better than others or achieving more than others. It's about becoming fully yourself, expressing your authentic nature so completely and purely that you inspire others to do the same. It's about contributing something genuinely valuable to the world, not for recognition or reward, but because it's an expression of who you truly are. This kind of greatness often goes unrecognized during a person's lifetime. The truly great are usually too busy serving, creating, and loving to spend much energy promoting themselves. They're motivated by the intrinsic value of what they're doing, rather than by external validation. Think about the people who've most influenced your own development. Chances are, at least some of them were not famous or wealthy, but they had qualities that touched your life in profound ways. Perhaps a teacher who believed in you when you didn't believe in yourself, a friend who showed you what genuine loyalty looks like, or a family member who demonstrated unconditional love. These people achieved a form of greatness that's available to everyone, the greatness of being authentically good. They didn't need special talents or extraordinary circumstances. They just needed the willingness to express their natural capacity for kindness, wisdom, and love. This kind of greatness is actually more powerful than the superficial greatness that depends on external achievement. When someone is genuinely good, when they're honest, kind, reliable, and generous, they create a field of positive influence around them that affects everyone they encounter. You've probably experienced this yourself. When you're around someone who embodies genuine goodness, you feel uplifted. You want to be your better self. You're reminded of what's possible in human nature. This influence often extends far beyond what the person themselves realizes. The great spiritual teachers throughout history understood this principle. They didn't seek power or recognition for themselves, but they embodied qualities that transformed everyone around them. Their influence continues centuries after their deaths, because they tapped into something timeless and universal. But you don't have to be a spiritual teacher to access this principle. Every time you choose kindness over selfishness, truth over convenience, or service over personal gain, you're expressing the same force that made the great teachers great. Every time you treat someone with genuine respect and care, you're contributing to the healing of the world. This understanding completely changes your relationship with ambition and achievement. Instead of trying to become great through external accomplishments, you focus on becoming genuinely good. Instead of comparing yourself to others, you compare yourself to your own potential. Instead of seeking recognition, you seek to serve. Paradoxically, this often leads to greater external success as well. When you're motivated by genuine care rather than personal gain, people trust you more. When you're focused on contributing value rather than just getting ahead, you often create opportunities that wouldn't have been available otherwise. When you're authentic rather than manipulative, people want to work with you and support your efforts. But even if external success doesn't come, you've achieved something more valuable, the satisfaction of living in alignment with your highest nature. You've become the kind of person you respect, someone who contributes to rather than detracts from the well-being of the world. This approach to greatness is also much more sustainable than the conventional approach. External achievements can be lost, but the character you develop through choosing goodness becomes part of who you are. Economic conditions might change, but your capacity for kindness remains. Others might surpass your accomplishments, but no one can take away the love you've given or the positive influence you've had on others. Greatness through goodness is also available immediately. You don't have to wait until you achieve certain goals or develop particular skills. You can express kindness, honesty, and generosity right now, in whatever situation you're currently in. The opportunity for greatness exists in every interaction, every decision, every moment. This doesn't mean you shouldn't pursue external goals or develop your talents. It means approaching these pursuits from a foundation of goodness rather than ego. It means using your abilities to serve something larger than yourself, rather than just to enhance your own status or security. When you approach life this way, your work becomes a form of worship, your relationships become opportunities for love, and your daily activities become expressions of your highest values. You're not waiting for someday when you'll be great enough to matter. You're recognizing that you already matter and choosing to express that significance through goodness. This is the greatness that's available to everyone, regardless of their circumstances, abilities, or external resources. It's the greatness of being fully human, of expressing the love, wisdom, and creativity that are your birthright. It's the greatness of contributing to the healing and elevation of the world, simply by being authentically yourself. Chapter 13. Heaven in your heart. The heaven that all people seek, the state of perfect peace, unconditional love, and complete fulfillment, isn't a distant realm you might reach after death, or a future condition you might achieve through enough effort and accomplishment. It's a way of being that's available to you right now, in this moment, regardless of your external circumstances. This might seem like an impossible claim. After all, if heaven is available right now, why does life often feel so difficult? Why do people struggle with anxiety, depression, conflict, and dissatisfaction? Why does the world seem full of suffering and injustice? The answer lies in understanding that heaven isn't a place, but a state of consciousness. It's not about what's happening around you, but about how you're relating to what's happening around you. It's possible to experience heaven in the midst of challenging circumstances, just as it's possible to experience hell even when everything appears to be going well. Heaven is the natural state of a heart that's free from resentment, fear, and selfishness. It's what emerges when you stop fighting reality and learn to work with life as it is, rather than as you think it should be. It's the peace that comes from knowing that your worth isn't dependent on external validation, that your security doesn't come from controlling circumstances, and that your happiness doesn't require things to be different than they are. This doesn't mean becoming passive or indifferent. Someone who has found heaven in their heart is often more engaged with life, not less. They respond to suffering with compassion, to injustice with appropriate action, and to opportunities with enthusiasm. But they do so from a place of inner stability rather than reactive emotion. The key to accessing this state is understanding that most of your suffering comes not from your circumstances, but from your resistance to your circumstances. When something happens that you don't like, you often add layers of mental commentary. This shouldn't be happening. It's not fair. What if it gets worse? This mental resistance creates far more suffering than the original situation itself. For example, if you're stuck in traffic, the actual experience is just sitting in a car surrounded by other cars. It's not inherently pleasant or unpleasant, it just is. But your mind might create stories. I'm going to be late. This always happens to me. I should have left earlier. Other people are so inconsiderate. These thoughts create stress, frustration, and anxiety that have nothing to do with the simple fact of being in traffic. When you learn to experience situations without this mental commentary, you discover that most experiences are actually quite neutral. What makes them seem positive or negative is the story you tell yourself about them. When you stop creating unnecessary stories, you free yourself to respond appropriately to what's actually happening. This shift in perspective can transform even difficult experiences. Physical pain, for instance, might still be uncomfortable, but it doesn't have to create mental suffering. Disappointment might still feel sad, but it doesn't have to become despair. Conflict might still be challenging, but it doesn't have to destroy your peace. Heaven in your heart also means finding the sacred in ordinary moments. Instead of waiting for special occasions or perfect circumstances to feel grateful and peaceful, you begin to appreciate the simple gifts that are always available. The ability to breathe, the warmth of sunlight, the taste of water, the sound of laughter, the feeling of being alive. This appreciation isn't forced or artificial. It emerges naturally when you're fully present to your experience, rather than lost in thoughts about the past or future. When you're actually here, in this moment, you often discover that this moment contains more beauty and wonder than you usually notice. Finding heaven in your heart also transforms your relationships. Instead of needing others to behave in particular ways to make you happy, you can appreciate them as they are, while also being honest about your own needs and boundaries. Instead of trying to get love, you can focus on giving love. Instead of protecting yourself from potential hurt, you can remain open while also being wise. This doesn't make you vulnerable to being taken advantage of. If anything, it makes you more discerning, because you're not making decisions from neediness or fear. You can see situations more clearly and respond more appropriately when you're not driven by desperation or anxiety. Perhaps most importantly, when you find heaven in your heart, you stop postponing your life. You stop waiting for conditions to be perfect before you allow yourself to be happy. You stop believing that you'll be okay someday when you achieve certain goals or resolve certain problems. You recognize that this moment, imperfect as it might be, is the only life you actually have. This doesn't mean giving up on improvement or growth. It means pursuing these things from a foundation of contentment rather than desperation. It means working toward goals because you're inspired to contribute and create, not because you believe you need achievements to be worthy of love and happiness. When you discover heaven in your heart, you realize that you already have what you've been seeking through external means. The peace you've been trying to create through controlling circumstances is already available within you. The love you've been trying to earn through performance is already yours. The fulfillment you've been trying to achieve through accomplishments is already present in your capacity to appreciate and contribute to life. This recognition doesn't end your engagement with the world, it transforms it. Instead of pursuing things because you feel incomplete without them, you pursue them as expressions of your completeness. Instead of trying to get from life, you focus on giving to life. Instead of being driven by what you lack, you're inspired by what you have to offer. This is the heaven that's always available, the peace that surpasses understanding, the joy that doesn't depend on circumstances. It's not a reward for being good enough or achieving enough. It's your natural state when you stop creating unnecessary suffering through resistance to what is. You don't have to wait for perfect conditions to access this state. You don't have to resolve all your problems or achieve all your goals. You don't have to become someone different than who you are right now. You simply have to stop fighting life and start working with it. Stop resisting what is and start responding to it with wisdom and love. Heaven is here, now, in your heart, waiting for you to recognize it. It's been there all along, beneath the layers of worry, want, and resistance. When you quiet those layers, even for a moment, you discover the peace and love that are your true nature. And once you've tasted this heaven, you can learn to return to it again and again, until living from this place becomes as natural as breathing. Conclusion: the transformed life. The journey from a life of struggle, anxiety, and constant wanting to one of peace, abundance, and natural fulfillment isn't about changing your external circumstances, though those often change as a side effect. It's about discovering and living from your authentic nature, the part of you that doesn't need to strive and compete because it knows it already has everything it truly needs. This transformation doesn't happen overnight, and it doesn't mean you'll never face challenges or experience difficult emotions. What changes is your relationship to these experiences. Instead of being overwhelmed by them, you learn to move through them with grace. Instead of fighting against them, you learn to work with them as opportunities for growth and deeper understanding. The principles explored in this book, living in the present moment, choosing love over fear, finding your inner foundation, embracing simplicity, developing wisdom, practicing gentleness, living with integrity, embodying love, discovering true freedom, expressing authentic greatness, and finding heaven in your heart, are not just philosophical concepts. They're practical approaches to living that, when consistently applied, create profound changes in both your inner experience and your external circumstances. As you begin to live from these principles, you might notice that opportunities appear that you hadn't seen before. Relationships improve in ways you couldn't have orchestrated. Solutions to problems emerge naturally. What you need somehow becomes available, just when you need it. This isn't magic. It's simply how life responds when you're aligned with love rather than fear, abundance rather than scarcity, cooperation rather than competition. You might also discover that your goals and desires begin to shift. Things that once seemed desperately important lose their urgency. New aspirations emerge that feel more aligned with your authentic nature. You find yourself motivated more by the desire to contribute and create than by the need to acquire and protect. This doesn't mean becoming passive or losing your ambition. If anything, you might find yourself more effective and productive because your actions are coming from inspiration rather than desperation, from love rather than fear, from wisdom rather than reactive emotion. Perhaps most importantly, you'll discover that you don't have to wait for anything to change before you can access peace, love, and fulfillment. These qualities are not rewards for good behavior or achievements to be earned through effort. They're your natural state when you stop creating unnecessary suffering through resistance to what is. The ancient promise that all these things shall be added unto you proves to be literally true. When you seek first the kingdom of heaven, the state of inner peace and alignment with love, everything else you truly need flows naturally into your life. Not through magic or wishful thinking, but through the practical operation of living in harmony with the deeper laws that govern human experience. This is the great secret that mystics, sages, and wise people throughout history have discovered. The very thing you've been seeking through external means has been within you all along. The peace you've been trying to create through controlling circumstances is already present in your heart. The love you've been trying to earn through performance is already your essential nature. The abundance you've been trying to accumulate through acquisition is already available through appreciation and trust. The journey to discovering this truth is the most worthwhile adventure you can undertake. It requires courage, because it means giving up familiar patterns even when they're not serving you. It requires patience, because transformation happens gradually, layer by layer. It requires faith, because you have to trust in something beyond your current understanding. But it also offers the greatest reward possible, the discovery of who you really are, beneath all the layers of conditioning, fear, and false identity. The realization that you are not a separate, vulnerable being struggling to survive in a hostile world, but an expression of the love and intelligence that creates and sustains all life. When you truly understand this, everything changes. Your work becomes an expression of love, rather than just a means of survival. Your relationships become opportunities for mutual growth and support, rather than transactions for getting your needs met. Your daily activities become sacred, because you recognize that every moment is an opportunity to express your authentic nature. This is the life that's available to you, not someday when conditions are perfect, but right now, in whatever circumstances you currently find yourself. The kingdom of heaven, the realm of peace and love and natural abundance, is not a distant destination, but a present reality, waiting to be recognized and inhabited. All these things, peace, love, joy, wisdom, true security, authentic relationships, meaningful work, and everything else your heart truly desires, are added unto you not through striving and struggling, but through the simple recognition of what has always been true. You are already complete, already whole, already enough. Everything else is just the natural expression of that completeness flowing into the world.